You know, one of the things I've learned over and over again is that silence is never really empty. We think of it as nothingness, as absence, as a blank space. But silence isn't just a lack of words, it's a language of its own. It has its own grammar, its own vocabulary, its own ways of saying what words can't or won't touch. Sometimes the most powerful messages in life aren't whispered in your ear. They're felt in the pauses, in the space between moments, in what someone doesn't say. Think about it. You've been in a room before with someone you love, or someone who once meant the world to you, and they didn't have to say anything at all for you to feel the weight of what was going on. Maybe it was the way they avoided your eyes. Maybe it was how they lingered a little longer than necessary before walking away. Maybe it was the fact that they didn't text you back, not just for an hour, but for days. And you could feel deep in your gut that this wasn't just them being busy. Silence in moments like that isn't neutral. It's heavy. It's deliberate. And it says more than 1,000 words could. The problem is, most of us are conditioned to listen only for words. We're trained from a young age to put value in what people say, to take comfort in reassurances, to believe declarations, to wait for verbal confirmation. But life doesn't always hand you the courtesy of clear communication. Sometimes, the truth comes without subtitles. Sometimes, it's delivered in silence. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it entirely. But here's the thing. When someone's silence is about you, you feel it. You feel it like a pulse. You might try to ignore it. You might try to reason it away. But it sits there, pressing against your awareness, asking to be noticed. It's not just absence, it's presence in disguise. Their silence, the kind that still holds your name inside it, isn't a void, it's a signal. And I don't just mean in romantic relationships. This happens with friends, with family, with colleagues. Sometimes the person who once filled your days with conversation suddenly retreats. And in that retreat, they're still saying something. Their withdrawal is a statement. Their distance is a sentence. Their silence is a paragraph you can read without a single word written down. What makes it so powerful is that silence forces you to feel, rather than just hear. Words can be manipulated. Words can be dressed up, twisted, softened, or exaggerated. Silence doesn't have that luxury. Silence is pure. It's raw. It's real. You can't hide inside it without revealing something, because even the act of hiding is its own kind of revelation. Now, there's a reason this is so difficult to process. We crave certainty. When someone is silent, we fill in the blanks ourselves. We invent stories. We project our fears or our hopes into that quiet space. And this is where silence can drive you mad, because you don't know if it means, I miss you, or I'm done with you. You don't know if it's about love, or indifference, or pain they can't put into words. All you know is that it's there, and it's speaking to you whether you want to listen or not. But if you look closely, if you pay attention, you'll start to notice that silence isn't as ambiguous as it seems. It has its own tones. There's the silence of someone who doesn't care, which feels like cold air in an empty room. And then there's the silence of someone who cares so much. They're afraid to speak, because speaking might shatter something fragile. There's the silence of someone processing, and the silence of someone protecting themselves. And yes, the silence of someone calling out to you without knowing how. The most haunting silence is the one that carries your name. It's in the songs they play when they think no one's listening. It's in the way they linger in places where they might run into you. It's in the subtle pauses in a conversation where it feels like they almost said something, but swallowed it back down. You may never hear the words, but you feel the message. And sometimes that message is meant for you to hear. Not because they want you to act on it, but because it's all they can give. They don't have the courage or the clarity or the circumstances to say it out loud. But they still hope, on some level, that you'll hear the echo in the quiet. Silence is powerful because it strips away the noise. It forces you to pay attention to the truth that sits just beneath the surface. And whether you like it or not, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You can pretend it's not there, you can distract yourself, you can rationalize it. But deep down, or you already know what it's saying. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Because once you understand the language of silence, you'll never again be able to ignore it when it's screaming your name. We often underestimate how much the mind says without the mouth ever opening. When someone chooses not to speak, it's easy to think it's because they have nothing to say. But in reality, silence is usually a choice, and that choice is driven by something very human. People don't just withhold words for no reason. There's always a motive, even if they're not conscious of it. And if you can understand the psychology behind why someone goes quiet, you'll start to see that silence isn't a void. It's a mirror reflecting their inner world. Sometimes silence is self-protection. People guard themselves because they're scared of the consequences of speaking. They're afraid that if they open their mouth, they'll expose feelings they're not ready to admit, feelings that might make them vulnerable, rejected, or misunderstood. It's not that they don't care, it's that caring terrifies them. Speaking would make it real, and real is risky. So they wrap themselves in silence like a shield, hoping it will keep them safe, but not realizing that in doing so, they're still revealing exactly how much they feel. Other times, silence comes from fear of conflict. Not everyone is built to fight things out. For some, confrontation feels like a war zone, so instead of engaging, they retreat. They figure if they say nothing, they can avoid escalating the situation. But here's the catch. When someone stays silent to avoid a fight, it doesn't mean they've made peace. It means they've chosen internal conflict over external conflict, and now that battle is just happening inside their head instead of in the open. And you can feel that tension even if no words are exchanged. Silence can also be about control. When someone knows they have your attention, they realize that withholding communication is a way of keeping you leaning forward, trying to read them, trying to figure them out. In their mind, silence becomes a tool. They might not think of it as manipulation, but it creates a dynamic where they're the one holding the cards because you're the one doing all the emotional work to fill in the blanks. And let's be honest. When we care about someone, we will fill in those blanks. Our brain hates uncertainty, so it rushes to create a story, even if that story ends up hurting us more than the truth would. There's another reason silence can be so loud. It's because we project ourselves into it. When you care about someone and they don't speak, your mind doesn't just sit still. It starts painting pictures. If you're feeling insecure, their silence feels like rejection. If you're feeling hopeful, their silence feels like a secret love letter. You're not just hearing their silence, you're hearing your own thoughts amplified inside it. And that's why it can feel so intense, so personal, so undeniable. But here's what makes it so tricky. Silence can mean so many different things. It could mean, I don't know what to say. It could mean, I hope you'll read my mind. It could mean, I'm not ready to deal with this. Or it could mean, this matters to me so much, I'm afraid to ruin it. And the danger is, if you're not careful, you'll assign the meaning that matches your fears, not the truth. We don't see silence as neutral. We see it as a reflection of whatever story is loudest in our own head. What's fascinating is that even though silence hides words, it doesn't hide energy. You can feel when someone's silence is filled with thought versus when it's hollow and empty. You can sense when there's something unsaid sitting just behind their lips. You can feel the weight of a pause that's holding back an emotion, and you can tell when it's just the emptiness of someone who's checked out. It's not magic, it's just that human beings are deeply attuned to each other's emotional states, even when we pretend we're not. And if we're honest, sometimes we crave someone's silence because it still means they're in the picture. Their absence of words still feels like a kind of presence. It's a strange comfort. Painful, yes, but comforting, because if their silence is about us, it means we still matter to them in some way. But here's the thing that can trap you. You can start living in the hope that their quietness is just them waiting for the right moment, instead of realizing that maybe their quietness is them choosing not to have one. At the same time, there are moments when silence is an act of hope, when someone isn't ready, but they're holding on to the possibility that you'll just get it, that you'll feel what they feel without them having to risk saying it. They might think that silence is the safest way to protect the connection because words, once spoken, can't be taken back. But in reality, silence often erodes connection more than it preserves it, because without clarity, we start building walls made of our own assumptions. The mind is always working. Even in the absence of sound, it's creating meaning, drawing connections, interpreting signals. That's why someone's silence can feel louder than their speech. Because it forces you to listen, not to what they say, but to what you can feel. And when you can feel that the silence is about you, you can't unknow it. You can try to push it away. You can try to dismiss it, but the truth has a way of echoing inside you long after the moment has passed. Because when the mind chooses silence over words, it's never because there's nothing to say. It's because there's too much to say. Sometimes the most revealing part of a connection isn't what's spoken. It's what's happening in the spaces in between. Those quiet, in-between moments are where truth tends to hide. We like to think that communication is all about words, but the reality is most of it happens before anyone even opens their mouth. If you learn to notice the subtle cues, the pauses, the body language, the shifts in energy, you start to see that silence isn't empty. It's loaded. It's saying something even when nothing is being said. Think about the last time you were with someone and you felt like something was off. They might have smiled at you, nodded at the right moments, maybe even said all the right things, but something about the air between you felt different. Maybe their smile didn't quite reach their eyes. Maybe there was a hesitation before they answered a question. Maybe the hug goodbye felt just a little shorter than usual. Those details are small, but they're the fingerprints of truth. The human body is incapable of perfect silence. It always leaks information if you're paying attention. The tricky thing is, most of us are so busy waiting for the words, we miss the moments that speak louder than them. We focus on what someone says instead of how they say it. We focus on the content of the conversation instead of the rhythm, the timing, the undercurrent of feeling. And yet, those undercurrents are where the real story is. A pause before an answer isn't just a pause. It might be hesitation or fear or careful calculation. A person looking down when you're searching for eye contact might not be disinterested. They might be hiding a truth or fighting the urge to show what they feel. You can feel the difference between indifferent silence and intentional silence if you tune into it. Indifferent silence is flat. It's empty. It doesn't pull you in. It lets you drift away. Intentional silence, on the other hand, has gravity. It draws you closer. You feel like something is suspended there, waiting, almost asking to be touched. It's in the way someone's gaze lingers on you just a fraction too long. It's in the way they shift their weight toward you without realizing it. It's in the way they remember tiny details you didn't even think they noticed. These are the moments where silence turns into presence. And presence can be deafening when you notice it. You can walk away from a conversation feeling like someone said volumes to you, even if they barely spoke. It's because your mind picked up the messages their body was broadcasting. The subtle leaning in, the softening of their voice, the way their breathing changed when the topic got close to the bone. Now, here's the challenge. Reading between the quiet moments takes courage because once you see them, you can't unsee them. Once you notice that someone's words and their energy don't match, you have to face the reality that their truth might be living in the quiet, not in the sentences they give you. And for a lot of us, that's uncomfortable. It's easier to believe the words. Words are neat. They're direct. They give you something solid to hold on to. The quiet moments, on the other hand, are messier. They make you feel something before you can explain it. And sometimes we'd rather not feel it at all. But ignoring those moments doesn't make them disappear. If anything, it just means you're pretending not to understand a language your body already speaks fluently. You've been reading cues like this your whole life. You can tell when someone is upset without them saying a word. You can sense when someone's mood has shifted even if they swear they're fine. We all have that radar. The question is whether we're willing to believe it when it starts telling us something we don't want to hear. There's also a difference between interpreting and inventing. Reading between the quiet moments isn't about imagining an entire story from one glance. It's about noticing patterns. One missed call means nothing. But when someone repeatedly hesitates before answering you, when their eyes consistently avoid yours at certain topics, when their body always turns slightly away at the exact moment something important is said, that's not coincidence. That's communication. Sometimes the loudest message is in what stops happening. Maybe they used to reach out and touch your arm when they laughed and now they don't. Maybe they used to send you goodnight texts without fail and now the nights are silent. You can't always explain it, but you can feel the absence. The human heart is sensitive to subtraction. It notices when something that was once freely given starts being withheld. And here's the most haunting part. When someone's silence still carries your name, you feel it in those quiet moments more than anywhere else. You see it in the way their expression changes when they first notice you in a room. You hear it in the way their voice softens when they say hello. You feel it in the way they seem almost on the verge of speaking, but stop themselves, like there's a thought they're holding on to, something too fragile or too risky to release into the air. We often think silence is the absence of communication, but in truth, it's a form of communication that requires you to pay closer attention. The words tell you what someone wants you to hear. The quiet moments tell you what they can't or won't say out loud. And when you start listening for those moments, you realize that some silences aren't empty at all. They're full of meaning, full of feeling, and sometimes full of you. There's a particular kind of silence that doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It follows you. It hangs in the air like an echo that refuses to fade. It's not the absence of sound. It's the presence of something unspoken, looping over and over again in your mind until it becomes impossible to ignore. This is the kind of silence that feels personal, as if it's been shaped to fit you, as if it's carrying your name through every second of it. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can say nothing, yet you feel them everywhere. You can be in a different room, a different city, maybe even a different life now, and still sense that their quiet is directed at you. It's in the way they no longer reach out, but somehow you feel like they're still watching, still aware, still holding something back. It's in the gaps they've left in your days, the texts that don't come anymore, the phone calls that never happen, the spaces in conversation where their voice used to live. This kind of silence isn't random. It has weight. It's loaded with meaning, even if you can't immediately decode it. And the more you feel it, the more it begins to feel like a presence instead of an absence. Like the ghost of a conversation that never happened, but should have. It's a silence that follows you into the quiet moments of your own life. You're brushing your teeth, cooking dinner, scrolling on your phone, and there it is again. This strange, invisible connection between you and them that refuses to let go. Sometimes that silence is full of love. The kind of love that's too complicated, too tangled in circumstances to be spoken out loud. They can't tell you they miss you, but their silence carries that ache. They can't explain why they're not there, but their absence is pulsing with the desire to be. They hope somehow you'll feel it, that you'll sense they still think about you, even without proof. Other times, the silence is full of pain. Maybe it's regret. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's the kind of hurt that swallows words whole before they can escape. In those cases, the silence is almost protective, keeping a lid on emotions that, if released, might explode in ways neither of you are ready for. They hold back, not because they don't feel anything, but because they feel too much. It's easy to mistake this kind of silence for indifference, but they're not the same. Indifference has no pull. It doesn't follow you. It doesn't haunt you. It doesn't make you wonder what's unsaid, but when someone's silence feels like it has your name carved into it, you can sense the difference without needing an explanation. It's like walking into a room and knowing someone's been there. Even though everything looks untouched, the air just feels different. The reason this silence can be so powerful is because it works like an echo. The initial moment, the conversation that ended, the meeting that passed, the decision that created distance, might have happened a long time ago. But the silence keeps bouncing back. Every time it reaches you, it stirs something. It could be longing. It could be sadness. It could be that gnawing question, do they still think about me the way I think about them? And the cruel part is, you'll probably never get a definitive answer. Silence doesn't hand out certainty. It just invites speculation, and we, as humans, can't resist filling in the blanks. If we're hopeful, we turn that silence into a love story still being written. If we're afraid, we turn it into the final chapter. Either way, we project ourselves into it, and in doing so, we give that silence more life, more shape, more presence. It's no longer just theirs. It's partly ours, because we've wrapped it in our own meaning. There are moments, though, when you can tell the silence is deliberate. It's not neglect. It's not forgetfulness. It's a choice, and that choice means they are aware of you. They are thinking of you. They are intentionally not speaking because speaking would shift something, maybe in their life, maybe in yours. And so they stay quiet, but their quiet isn't empty. It's like a letter they never send, but keep tucked away, convinced you'll somehow know what it says without ever reading it. It's a strange dance, being called by something you can't hear, being reached for by someone who never extends their hand. You can't see the rope, but you feel it. And deep down, you know that as much as silence can hurt, it can also confirm what you've suspected all along, that you matter more to them than they're willing or able to admit. Because some silences don't fade with time. They grow louder. They fill the space between what is and what could have been. And when they carry your name, you don't just hear them. You feel them over and over again until they become impossible to ignore. Silence has a strange duality to it. It can be the softest, most comforting blanket you've ever wrapped yourself in, or it can be a blade that slices through you when you least expect it. It's one of those things in life that can hold completely opposite meanings depending on who's holding it, why they're using it, and how you choose to receive it. On one hand, silence can be a form of healing. It can give you space to process, to breathe, to let the dust settle after a storm. Sometimes, when emotions are high, the wisest thing someone can do is step back and say nothing, because in that pause, they stop the situation from spiraling into something neither of you can take back. In moments like that, silence isn't avoidance, it's respect. It's the choice to let clarity emerge before speaking. It's giving the connection a chance to survive by not throwing more fuel on the fire. But on the other hand, silence can be the thing that erodes the very bond it's trying to protect. When silence becomes a wall instead of a pause, it starts creating distance that's harder and harder to close. You begin to wonder what's behind it. You start guessing, assuming, replaying the last conversation to figure out what went wrong. And in the absence of answers, the mind will happily invent its own. The longer that silence lasts, the more the story you tell yourself becomes the truth you live with. The tricky part is that from the outside, those two kinds of silence, healing and hurting, can look exactly the same. Both involve no words. Both can stretch on for days or weeks. Both can leave you wondering. The difference is in the intent, and unfortunately, intent is rarely obvious unless the person chooses to make it known. Sometimes they don't even know themselves whether their silence is meant to protect the connection or end it. There's a vulnerability in realizing that someone else's quiet can shape how you feel about yourself. When silence is loving, it's a gesture that says, I care enough to give this space. But when silence is cold, it feels like punishment. It says, you're not worth my time, my energy, or my honesty. And the hardest part is that it's not always easy to tell which one you're getting, especially if you want it to be the first one so badly that you ignore the signs it's actually the second. Silence as a bridge is about creating a safe gap. It's like saying, let's take a moment so we can come back to this as our better selves. There's hope in that. It keeps the connection alive because the intent is to return to the conversation, to the relationship, to the shared space you've built. Even without words, you can feel the thread still connecting you. You might be apart, but you're still in it together. Silence as a barrier, though. That's different. That's when the thread starts to fray. It's not holding space for a better moment. It's avoiding the moment altogether. It's the kind of quiet that doesn't feel temporary. You can sense the shift in the air, the way they no longer lean toward you, the way their eyes don't hold yours as long, the way they've stopped leaving doors open for connection. This kind of silence doesn't give you room to breathe. It takes the air out of the room entirely. The challenge is, we often give too much benefit of the doubt. We tell ourselves the barrier is a bridge. We convince ourselves that if we just wait long enough, the silence will turn into words, and the words will turn into closeness again. Sometimes that happens, but sometimes the longer you wait, the more you realize that the silence was never a bridge. It was the slow construction of a wall. And yet, even knowing that, there's something about silence that keeps us hooked. Maybe it's because silence leaves the door cracked open for possibility. Words can slam a door shut, but silence leaves room for imagination. And imagination is powerful. It can keep you hanging on long after reality would have told you to let go. That's the danger and the beauty of silence. It forces you to sit with the unknown. It doesn't give you the clean relief of certainty, but it also doesn't give you the sting of outright rejection. And for some of us, that's enough to keep hoping. The bridge might still be there. The wall might still come down. The absence might still turn into presence again. But the truth is, silence only becomes a bridge when both people on either side intend to cross it. If one person is just standing still while the other is inching forward, it's not a bridge at all. It's just distance. That's why learning to tell the difference matters. Because silence, depending on its intent, will either hold you together or slowly pull you apart. And sometimes, the most painful thing isn't the silence itself. It's realizing you've been treating a wall like a bridge. The thing about silence is that it's so easy to get lost in it. We start turning it over in our minds, replaying moments, assigning it meanings that might not even be there. The danger is, if we're not careful, we can spend weeks, months, even years living in a story we've created about why someone hasn't spoken, instead of finding out the truth. And that's why at some point, you have to take that silence and turn it into clarity. Because without clarity, you'll never really know whether you're holding on to something real or holding on to an illusion. Turning quiet into clarity starts with looking inward before you look outward. It's tempting to make someone else's silence all about them. What they're feeling, what they're hiding, what they want from you. But the truth is, the first place to examine is yourself. What are you feeling when they're silent? Is it fear? Is it longing? Is it relief? Sometimes their silence is simply amplifying something you were already feeling about the relationship. Maybe you've known for a while that they're not fully in it, and the silence just confirms it. Or maybe you've been scared to admit how much they matter to you, and the quiet makes you realize how loud that truth really is. Once you've sat with your own feelings, the next step is deciding how much space you're willing to live in without answers. Some people are comfortable in uncertainty. They can leave things open-ended indefinitely. But most of us need resolution, because without it, silence starts to chip away at our confidence and our sense of reality. That's when you have to make a choice, stay in the guessing game or start a conversation that could change everything. Here's where it gets tricky. When you go looking for clarity, you have to be ready to hear an answer you might not like. That's why so many people avoid it. It's safer to live in the hope that the silence means something good than to hear for sure that it doesn't. But clarity is freedom, even if it hurts. It sets you free from the mental loops, the late night overthinking, the constant scanning for hidden meaning in every small interaction. Sometimes, finding clarity means asking direct questions. Sometimes, it means watching for actions instead of listening for words. If someone says they care but consistently keeps you at arm's length, their silence isn't a mystery. It's an answer. If someone claims they're just busy, but always has time for everyone else, their absence of presence is telling you more than they realize. You don't have to decode every tiny signal when the bigger pattern is already clear. It's also important to remember that not all silences are about you. People carry battles you can't see, fears, pressures, insecurities that affect how they show up. Someone's quiet might be about their own internal chaos, not about you at all. That's why assuming their silence automatically equals rejection can sometimes lead you to the wrong conclusion. The goal is to stay curious without making their quiet the sole definition of your worth. Clarity also comes from stepping back. Distance is a powerful lens. When you're right in the middle of the silence, it can feel impossible to think clearly. It's like being too close to a painting to see the whole image. But when you pull back, you start to notice the bigger picture. You see not just the moment they went quiet, but the pattern leading up to it. You remember how they showed up when things were good, how they acted when they were fully engaged. You can compare that to now and ask yourself, is this silence temporary, or is it the new normal? Or the hardest part of this process is accepting that clarity doesn't always come from them. It often comes from you deciding what their silence means for you. If they won't communicate, then your job isn't to endlessly decode. It's to decide what you're willing to live with. That decision might be to give them space, or it might be to step away entirely. But either way, you reclaim control. You're no longer just a listener to their silence. You're an active participant in your own story. And there's one more truth to keep in mind. Sometimes silence is all the clarity you need. It may not be the answer you wanted, but it's still an answer. If someone truly wants to be understood, to be known, to be connected, they'll find a way to speak, maybe not perfectly, maybe not immediately, but they will. If they don't, then their silence is telling you exactly where you stand, even if the words never come. Because, in the end, the point isn't to break the silence just for the sake of noise. It's to understand whether the quiet is a pause in the conversation or the end of it. And once you know that, you can finally decide what comes next.